Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. Thank you for taking time out of your day to check the video out. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and cover today. We're starting here with talking about the possibility of PlayStation game prices increasing. I have a report here from PlayStation Lifestyle, and they say PS5 games not getting a price increase in the near future, it seems. It looks like Sony will not increase the price of first-party PS5 games in the near future, unlike Nintendo and Microsoft. When Ghost of Yotei pre-orders finally went live yesterday, fans breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing that the standard version is still listed at $70 US. Ghost of Yotei's retail price is significant here because the game launches in October of 2025. Nintendo's new $80 price tag will come into effect starting in June with the launch of Switch 2, and Xbox game prices will be adjusted to $80 starting holiday 2025. Some fans reckon that Ghost of Yotei's price indicates that Sony will not be following suit until the end of 2025 at the very least, but what comes afterwards remains to be seen. For now, players are relieved. So I wanted to cover this briefly because, after hearing the news that Microsoft was going to be, or is going to be, increasing the price of their games to $80 this holiday season, and Nintendo has already done that with some of their first-party games starting in June, people were beginning to assume that, okay, anything that Sony's going to be releasing in the second half of this year, we can now expect to be $80, and Sony's going to get right on that. But as of right now, that's not the case. Both Death Stranding 2 on the Beach and Ghost of Yotei are still $70 for the standard editions. However, if I had to assume, 2026 would probably be the time when we see Sony decide to raise the prices to $80. But who knows? Maybe there's this slim chance that they'll go the remainder of this generation without doing such a thing. We'll have to continue to monitor it. Moving to the next topic, we have another interesting report here, this time regarding Naughty Dog. Coming from WCCF Tech, according to insider Daniel Richtman, Santa Monica-based developer Naughty Dog quietly canceled an unannounced single-player game earlier this year. The project had been in development for over a year following the cancellation of The Last of Us Online, the ambitious multiplayer game that was ultimately canceled because Naughty Dog did not want to turn into a live service game studio. As you might remember, towards the latter end of its development, The Last of Us Online was being directed by Vinit Agrawal, who previously worked as game designer on Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, and The Last of Us Part 2. He then moved on to this unannounced project, which was still in its infancy when it was canceled. Agrawal subsequently left Naughty Dog. Again, according to Richtman, another unannounced single-player game is still in the works at the studio. This one is further along in development, having started around 3 years ago. Its director is Sean Eskag, who returned to Naughty Dog in April 2021 after a brief stint at Crystal Dynamics as the director of the ill-fated Marvel's Avengers. Eskag was previously credited as the lead cinematic animator on The Last of Us and Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, and later directed Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. So obviously take this with a grain of salt. I don't know how reliable Daniel Richtman is when it comes to this stuff, but he seems to be one of the only people that's feeding us a little bit of info here and there about what's going on at Naughty Dog. And so basically what we're looking at is that there were ultimately 3 single-player games in development, Intergalactic being one of them, this project by Sean Eskag that's 3 years in development being another, but the third, which was apparently canceled, was something that was not really far along in development, and I guess it just kind of wasn't coming together. And unfortunately, the developer who was leading that project ended up leaving the studio, which is interesting when you consider their history. They seem to have worked on a lot of Naughty Dog's games and clearly had some high level of talent here. But you just can't help but wonder what this third single-player game was going to be and, why it wasn't coming together. But at this point, what I really want to know is what this second single-player game is that's been in development for over 3 years. That one, I think, is going to be very interesting because it seems pretty clear, in my opinion anyway, it's not a Last of Us game. So I guess time will tell. Moving to the next topic, we have a report here on how well Expedition 33 is selling on PS5, despite it also being on Xbox Game Pass. This is being reported by Push Square. They say whenever a game is included as part of a subscription, you're always going to see it get a boost in players. That much is true of PS Plus, and it's also the case with Xbox Game Pass. But despite Clair Obscur Expedition 33 launching as part of Microsoft's service, plenty of players are paying for the game on Sony system. Analyst firm Ampere reports that roughly 30% of the RPG's players are on PS5, with 45% on Xbox Series consoles and the remaining 25% on PC. It should be stressed that this data only accounts for major European markets, the US, Canada, and Australia, so it's missing the entirety of Asia. One interesting wrinkle here, though, is that PS5 owners are playing the game for longer, an average of 4.4 hours compared to the 2.2 hours on Microsoft's console. Obviously, the more players you have, the lower the average is likely to fall, but it does suggest that those who paid full price for the game are more likely to stick with it. So this was worth mentioning because this is, as of right now, I think the game of the year for a lot of people, and is clearly going to be in the running for Game of the Year officially, and it is a Game Pass title. So it is, I think, worth noting here that even though we are seeing a big title like this drop day one into a subscription service that you could decide to subscribe to, even if it's just for a month to try this out, people are still buying this game on both PS5 and Steam, to a pretty significant margin here, which, again, I think it just continues to highlight that people just still like to buy and own their video games, right? And yeah, it does naturally make sense that if you're going to buy a game and own it, whether it be digitally or physically, you're likely going to invest more time into it than if you're just engaging with it on a sub-service. That's not true all the time, of course, but just some interesting data here that I thought was worth covering. Next up, we're talking about the PS5 Pro officially now being cheaper than the 2TB Xbox Series X console, which is unbelievable, honestly. And so we know that Microsoft recently announced price increases across pretty much the entire Xbox brand. The company announced it is adjusting the recommended retail pricing for consoles and controllers worldwide. Headsets are also getting a price increase, but only in the US and Canada. Additionally, beginning this holiday season, some Xbox first-party titles will be $80. But the real kicker here, I think, comes with the $730 2TB Galaxy Black Xbox Series X. To me, this has to be the craziest thing we're looking at because people went absolutely berserk on the PS5 Pro being priced at $700, even though it is quite a significant upgrade compared to the base model PS4, as we've clearly seen. And it's not to say that $700 isn't a little bit shocking for a console. I think it is, so it's understandable why people would be surprised. But now we're at a point where we're seeing a Xbox Series X, which is significantly less capable and less powerful than the PS5 Pro, somehow being priced higher than the Pro. I mean, it's absolutely insane, and honestly, I just can't help but think of a lot of the people that immediately took to the internet, to jump on the bandwagon, to dogpile on the PS5 Pro and convince people that it's not worth it. It's just a bad console. Sony's trying to rip you off. Really can't help but wonder what they're saying now about this 2TB Series X that is offering no meaningful improvement whatsoever, but is somehow more expensive than the PS5 Pro. Can't help but wonder. But moving on to the final topics of the video, I want to briefly cover something that once again highlights how important physical video games are and physical media is. So the Evil Dead game, the multiplayer game that came out in 2023, is now being delisted from all digital stores, while the servers will remain online. And so once again, we're seeing a prime example of why physical games matter and are important, because luckily there are physical copies of this Evil Dead game. And I would recommend, if you have any interest at all, now would be the time to purchase it, because the prices, they may have already gone up, but I know the last time I checked, I think it was being sold for like $10 or $15. But yeah, the idea is once this game is delisted, you will simply have no way to purchase it outside of the physical copies. Now, if this game was a digital-only title, and once it's delisted, that's it. There's just simply no way to ever purchase it again. And so, yeah, we have seen this multiple times, and it's continuing to happen with games like this. And I know that it's like, well, it's an Evil Dead multiplayer game. You know, how many people are really going to be playing it and how much interest is there really? But that's kind of not the point, right? The idea is you want to have these physical versions there just for the sake of preservation, right? But also if you ever decide you want to try to purchase this game, you will have a means to do that. Anyway, we're going to move on to the final topic here, which talks about the GTA 6 delay. This is coming from WCCF Tech. It says GTA 6 officially has a release date, but it's not the one players had expected. It will arrive on current-gen consoles on May 26, 2026, as Rockstar and Take-Two confirmed that it was delayed outside of its initial fall 2025 release window. Despite Rockstar having a history of delaying its biggest games at least once or twice before they finally release, Take-Two boss Strauss Zelnick's stalwart reassurances that Grand Theft Auto 6 would release in fall 2025 had plenty of fans believing that this time it would be different. And while it very well could have been, a comment from Bloomberg reporter Jason Schreier indicates that Rockstar knew this delay would happen for some time now. In a post on Blue Sky, Schreier indicates that per conversations he's had with Rockstar employees, there's been no real chance that Grand Theft Auto 6 would be releasing in fall of 2025 for a very long time now. So I thought this was worth mentioning just because, yeah, I have to admit, I was one of these people where, considering how aggressively Strauss Zelnick kept saying, like, we're going to hit fall of 2025, you know, we're on track, I did believe it. But apparently internally at Rockstar, they were just kind of shaking their heads like, that's just simply not going to happen. That's not going to be possible. Like, they knew this whole time. But, you know, couldn't say anything about it. But it is true that if you look at the history of Rockstar games, they always delay their games once or twice. I already see people anticipating that there's going to be another delay, and this is going to end up being like a September or October 2026 game. And yeah, that's very well possible. But guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you did, be sure to leave it a like, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.